The 1970s represented both the zenith and decline of the American muscle car era. While cars like the Mustang, Camaro, and Charger became household names, many incredible machines faded into obscurity despite their impressive performance credentials. These forgotten warriors of the asphalt deserve recognition for their contributions to automotive history. Today we're counting down the top 10 forgotten muscle cars of the 1970s, the overlooked powerhouses that delivered serious performance but never quite received the acclaim they deserved. 10. AMC Rebel Machine, 1970. The 1970 AMC Rebel Machine stands as one of American Motors Corporation's most audacious performance offerings. Produced for just 1 year, this striking muscle car came standard with a 390 cubic inch V8 generating 340 horsepower
and 430 pound-feet of torque.
Most examples wore the distinctive red, white, and blue paint scheme with bold "The Machine" graphics along the sides. The Rebel Machine could sprint from
0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.3 seconds.
And run the quarter mile in 14.4 seconds at 98
miles per hour.
Impressive numbers for 1970. With just 2,326 units built, it's now one of the rarest and most sought-after AMC performance cars. Despite its impressive statistics, the Rebel Machine was overshadowed by its competitors and even by AMC's later Javelin and AMX models. 9. Mercury Cyclone. Spoiler 2, 1969 to 1970. Though technically introduced in 1969, the Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2 continued into the 1970 model year. This aerodynamic special was built specifically for NASCAR competition, featuring a sloped nose and other wind-cheating modifications to help drivers like Cale Yarborough dominate on superspeedways. The street versions came with the 351 Windsor V8 as standard, but the top performers received the mighty 429 Cobra Jet engine producing 370 horsepower. With approximately 503 Spoiler 2s built, these are exceptionally rare finds today. The Cyclone Spoiler 2 has long lived in the shadow of its Ford Torino Talladega cousin, despite being the more limited production of the two. 8. Pontiac Formula 400 455, 1970 to 1974. While the Pontiac Trans Am gets all the glory, the Formula 400 and 455 models delivered nearly identical performance in a more subtle package. These muscle cars were essentially stealth Firebirds, offering the same powertrains without the flashy graphics and appearance packages. The 1970 Formula 455 was particularly potent, with its 455 cubic inch V8 producing 370 horsepower and a massive 500,000 lb-ft of torque. Later in the decade, even as emissions regulations strangled performance, the Formula models maintained respectable power. The 1973-74 Super Duty 455 Formula was among the last true high-performance engines of the era, rated at 310 horsepower, when most competitors had already given up. 7. Buick GSX-X, Stage 1, 1970 to 1972. People often forget that Buick built some of the most powerful muscle cars of the era. The GSX Stage 1 was Buick's answer to the GTO Judge and 442 W30, featuring the incredible 455 cubic inch V8 with 360 horsepower and a jaw-dropping 510 lb-ft of torque, the highest torque rating of any American production car until the modern era. The 1970 GSX Stage 1 could run the quarter mile in 13.4 seconds straight from the showroom floor. The distinctive Saturn Yellow, or Apollo white paint schemes with black stripes made these cars stand out. But with only 678 GSX models produced in 1970, and only 400 of those with the Stage 1 package, they're rarely seen today. Production continued through 1972, though with steadily decreasing performance. 6. Mercury Montego GT, 1971-1973. The Mercury Montego GT represents one of the most overlooked intermediate muscle cars of the early 1970s. Based on the Ford Torino platform, but with Mercury's distinctive styling, the Montego GT offered impressive performance options, including the 351 Cleveland V8 and the monstrous 429 Cobra Jet engine with up to 370 horsepower. The Montego GT featured a unique hood with dual air scoops, competition suspension, and distinctive striping. Despite its performance credentials and handsome styling, the Montego GT lived in the shadow of its Ford cousins and never sold in large numbers. Today, they're among the rarest muscle cars of the era, especially when equipped with the 429 CJ engine. 5. Oldsmobile 442 W30, 1972 to 1974. While the Oldsmobile 442 itself isn't forgotten, many enthusiasts overlook the fact that Oldsmobile continued offering high-performance W30 packages well into the emissions-strangled mid-70s. The 1972 442 W30 still packed a 455 cubic inch V8 with 300 net horsepower, equivalent to about 370 horsepower under the previous gross rating system. These later W30 cars featured functional ram air induction, special camshafts, and upgraded suspension components. The distinctive red inner fenders remained a W30 trademark. With their lower production numbers and increasingly restrained visual packages, these later 442 W30 models have become the forgotten soldiers of the muscle car wars, despite offering strong performance when most manufacturers had already surrendered. 4. Dodge Coronet RT, 1970 to 1971. Standing in the shadow of its Charger sibling, the Coronet RT was Dodge's other big B-body muscle car. For 1970, the Coronet RT received aggressive new styling with a dramatic front end, nicknamed the Loop Bumper design. Under the hood lurked the same power plants as the Charger, including the base 440 Magnum V8 with 375 horsepower and the optional 426 Hemi with 425 horsepower. The 1971 model was the final year for the Coronet RT, featuring a more subdued grille design but maintaining its muscle car credentials. With production numbers far lower than the Charger, especially for 426 Hemi models, only 10 Hemi Coronet RTs were built in 1971. These cars represent rare prizes for collectors today. 3. Plymouth Roadrunner GTX, 1971 to 1970. Boom. By 1971, the Plymouth Roadrunner and GTX models merged into a single lineup, with GTX becoming an optional package on the Roadrunner. These third-generation B-body muscle cars featured dramatic fuselage styling with swooping lines and a loop front bumper similar to the Dodge Coronet. The 1971 Roadrunner GTX could still be ordered with the 446 3.2-barrel carburetors or the 426 Hemi engines. With rising insurance rates and fuel prices, very few buyers opted for these expensive, high-performance engines, making the 1971-72 Roadrunner GTX with big block power among the rarest muscle cars of the era. The unusual styling has only recently begun to find appreciation among collectors. 2. Ford Torino Cobra, 1970 to 1971. While the Ford Torino GT is relatively well known, the higher performance Cobra variant has been largely forgotten. Unlike the comfort-oriented GT, the Cobra was a purpose-built performance machine featuring the mighty 429 Cobra Jet V8 as standard equipment. Buyers could upgrade to the 429 Super Cobra Jet with a drag pack option that included a 4.30 PS1 rear axle ratio and an engine oil cooler. The 1970 to 71 Torino Cobra came with a competition suspension, a blacked-out hood with functional ram air induction, and minimal badging, the essence of a sleeper muscle car. With quarter-mile times in the mid-13-second range, the Torino Cobra could outrun many of its more celebrated competitors, yet it never received the same recognition as the Mustang or even the Torino GT. 1. Plymouth Duster 340 guns 360, 1970 to 1976. Topping our list is one of the most underrated muscle cars of all time, the Plymouth Duster 340 360. Built on the compact Valiant platform, the Duster combined lightweight with the potent 340 and later 360 cubic inch small block V8 engines. The 1970 to 71 Duster 340 produced 207 horsepower and could run the quarter mile in the mid-14-second range. Impressive performance for a car that costs significantly less than most muscle cars. Even as emissions regulations tightened, Plymouth maintained the Duster's performance credentials, switching to the 360 V8 for 1974 to 76. The Duster's affordable price, practical size, and respectable performance made it one of the few true muscle cars to survive deep into the 1970s. Yet it rarely receives the same recognition as its larger, more powerful competitors. With their distinctive styling and surprising performance, these budget, muscle machines deserve more appreciation from enthusiasts. The 1970s marked a challenging transition from muscle cars as they faced increasing safety regulations, insurance penalties, and the fuel crisis. While many iconic models vanished entirely, these 10 forgotten warriors continued delivering performance even as the golden age of muscle was ending. What makes these cars special isn't just their rarity or performance statistics. It's how they represent the determination of American automakers to keep the muscle car spirit alive during challenging times. They may have been forgotten by many, but for those who know, these machines represent some of the most interesting and significant muscle cars ever to hit American streets. If you enjoyed this journey through muscle car history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more automotive content that celebrates both the icons and the unsung heroes of American performance. Your support helps us continue bringing these automotive treasures back into the spotlight where they belong.